The radio crackled with her final transmission before the surface-to-air missile found its target. This is Phoenix 7. I'm hit and going down behind enemy lines. Captain Amanda Torres had been leading a routine supply mission over Afghanistan when her C-130 Hercules was struck by enemy fire, forcing her to attempt an emergency landing in territory controlled by Taliban forces. What military command expected was a rescue operation to recover one downed pilot. What they didn't expect was that Amanda would disappear into the mountain for 17 days, only to emerge at a forward operating base with something that would shock the entire military establishment. 97 freed prisoners of war, 23 rescued civilians, and intelligence that would change the course of the war. Because sometimes the most dangerous person behind enemy lines isn't the one being hunted, it's the one doing the hunting. Welcome to those who left a trace. Before we dive into this extraordinary story of survival, leadership, and impossible rescue operations, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you believe that heroes are defined not by how they fall, but by how many they lift up while rising, hit that subscribe button to support stories that honor those who risk everything for others. Captain Amanda Torres had always understood that flying military transport aircraft over hostile territory carried risks that extended far beyond mechanical failure or adverse weather conditions. At 32, she had logged over 2,000 flight hours in combat zones, delivering supplies to forward operating bases, evacuating wounded personnel, and conducting missions that kept American forces operational in some of the most dangerous environments on Earth. The C-130 Hercules that Amanda commanded was not just an aircraft. It was a lifeline that connected isolated military outposts with the resources they needed to survive and complete their missions. Her crew consisted of 4 experienced airmen: co-pilot Major Rick Santos, Flight Engineer Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, and 2 loadmasters, Technical Sergeant James Wilson and Senior Airman David Park. Together, they had completed over 50 missions without losing a single aircraft or crew member, earning a reputation for reliability that made them preferred crew for high-risk operations. The mission that would change everything began as a routine supply run to Forward Operating Base Chapman, a remote outpost located in the mountainous region of eastern Afghanistan, where American forces maintained a strategic presence despite constant threat from Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters. The base had been under intermittent siege for 3 weeks, with supply convoys unable to reach the facility due to increased enemy activity along the only viable ground route. Amanda C-130 was loaded with ammunition, medical supplies, food, and communications equipment that the 150 soldiers at Chapman needed to maintain their defensive positions and continue their mission of disrupting enemy supply lines through the region. The flight plan called for a low-altitude approach to minimize exposure to surface-to-air missiles, followed by a rapid offload and immediate departure before enemy forces could organize effective countermeasures. Torres, this is Control, came the voice of Lieutenant Colonel Hayes through Amanda's headset as her aircraft approached the designated drop zone. Intel indicates increased SAM activity in your area. Execute the drop as quickly as possible and get out of there. Amanda acknowledged the transmission while scanning her instruments and maintaining the precise flight path required for accurate cargo delivery. Copy, Control. We're 3 minutes out from the drop zone. All systems nominal. The C-130 was flying at 800 feet above ground level, low enough to avoid most radar detection, but high enough to clear the mountainous terrain that characterized the region. Amanda could see FOB Chapman in the distance, a small collection of fortified buildings and defensive positions that represented American presence in territory that was otherwise completely controlled by hostile forces. 2 minutes to drop, Amanda announced to her crew, beginning the final approach procedures that would position her aircraft for accurate cargo delivery while minimizing exposure time over the target area. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez monitored the aircraft's defensive systems, watching for indications of enemy radar or missile guidance systems that might threaten their approach. Torres, I'm picking up intermittent radar contacts, but nothing that looks like active targeting. The first indication of trouble came when Amanda spotted muzzle flashes from positions along the ridgelines surrounding FOB Chapman. Small arms fire was ineffective against an aircraft at their altitude, but indicated that enemy forces had observed their approach and were attempting to engage them with whatever weapons were available. Control, this is Phoenix 7, Amanda transmitted. We're taking small arms fire from multiple positions. Continuing approach to drop zone. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes' response was immediate. Phoenix 7, abort the mission if enemy fire becomes effective. The supplies aren't worth risking your aircraft and crew. Amanda maintained her approach. Understand that the soldiers at FOB Chapman had been without resupply for 3 weeks and desperately needed the materials her aircraft was carrying. Control, we're committed to the drop. 30 seconds to release. The surface-to-air missile that changed everything was launched from a position that intelligence had not identified as an active threat. The Soviet-made SA-7 shoulder-fired missile was decades old, but still capable of destroying aircraft that flew within its engagement envelope. Amanda saw the missile smoke trail for approximately 2 seconds before it impacted her aircraft's left engine. The explosion was catastrophic, destroying the engine and severing hydraulic lines that control the aircraft's flight surfaces. Amanda felt the C-130 lurch violently to the left as she lost control of several critical systems, while warning alarms filled the cockpit with sounds that every military pilot dreaded hearing. Mayday, Mayday, this is Phoenix 7. Amanda transmitted while fighting to maintain control of her damaged aircraft. We've taken a SAM hit and lost the number 2 engine. Attempting emergency landing. Major Santos immediately began executing emergency procedures, shutting down the damaged engine and attempting to restore hydraulic pressure to the flight controls. Torres, we've lost primary hydraulics and the backup system is failing. I don't think we can make it back to friendly territory. Amanda scanned the terrain below, looking for any area flat enough to attempt an emergency landing while avoiding the heavily forested mountains that surrounded their position. The aircraft was losing altitude rapidly, and she estimated they had less than 3 minutes before they would be forced to impact the ground regardless of terrain conditions. Crew, prepare for emergency landing, Amanda announced. We're going down in hostile territory. Follow survival protocols and be ready for immediate evasion procedures after impact. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez was already destroying classified communications equipment and preparing emergency survival gear for distribution to the crew. Torres, emergency. Destruction is complete. All crew members have individual survival kits and emergency beacons. Amanda identified a small valley that appeared to offer the best chance for survivable landing, though the terrain was far from optimal for a large transport aircraft. The C-130 was designed to operate from rough airstrips, but the improvised landing site was nothing more than rocky ground with scattered vegetation that would make the landing extremely dangerous. This is it. Amanda announced as she lined up for her final approach. Brace for impact. The C-130 struck the ground at 120 knots, far faster than normal landing speed, but slow enough that the aircraft's robust construction absorbed much of the impact energy. The landing gear collapsed immediately, and the aircraft slid across the rocky terrain for over 400 meters before coming to rest against a boulder formation that prevented it from continuing down the hillside. Amanda regained consciousness approximately 10 minutes after crash, finding herself still strapped into her pilot's seat with blood running down her face from multiple cuts caused by flying debris. Her first priority was determining the status of her crew members and assessing their situation in what she knew was hostile territory. Sound off, Amanda called out, relieving her restraints and beginning to move through the damaged aircraft. Wilson, Park, Santos, Gonzalez, report your status. Major Santos responded first, his voice weak but coherent. I'm conscious, but my left leg is broken. I can't move without assistance. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez answered from the cargo compartment. I'm mobile, but Wilson is unconscious, and Park isn't responding. I think Park is dead. Amanda made her way through the wreckage to assess her crew's condition and determine what resources they had available for survival in enemy territory. Senior Airman Park had been killed during the crash when cargo broke loose and struck him, while Technical Sergeant Wilson was unconscious with what appeared to be a severe head injury. Major Santos had suffered a compound fracture of his left leg that would require immediate medical attention and would prevent him from traveling on foot. The aircraft was a total loss, with damage so extensive that salvaging any significant equipment would be impossible. However, the cargo compartment contained supplies that could be valuable for survival. Medical equipment, ammunition, food, and communications gear that had survived the crash. Amanda quickly established a perimeter defense around the aircraft while assessing their tactical situation. They were approximately 15 miles behind enemy lines in mountainous terrain that would make rescue operations extremely difficult. More immediately concerning, the smoke from their crashed aircraft would attract enemy attention, giving them limited time before Taliban forces arrived to investigate. Gonzalez, how much communications equipment survived the crash? Amanda asked while gathering medical supplies to treat Santos' injury. The primary radio is destroyed, but I've got one tactical radio that seems functional. The GPS unit is working, so we know our exact position. Amanda used the tactical radio to establish contact with military headquarters and report their situation. Control, this is Phoenix 7. We've crashed approximately 15 miles northeast of Chapman. We have one Kia, one seriously injured, and 3 mobile crew members. Aircraft is a total loss, but we have some supplies and defensive capability. Lieutenant Colonel Hayes' response indicated the seriousness of their situation. Phoenix 7. We're organizing search and rescue operations, but enemy activity in your area is heavy. It may be several days before we can reach your position. Can you establish a defensive position and wait for extraction? Amanda looked at Major Santos, whose condition was deteriorating due to blood loss and shock from his leg injury. Wilson remained unconscious, and their position around the crashed aircraft was indefensible against any organized enemy attack. Control, we can't hold this position. Santos needs immediate medical attention, and the aircraft is too visible from enemy observation posts. We're going to move to more defensible terrain and await extraction. What Amanda didn't tell headquarters was that moving 3 injured crew members through 15 miles of hostile territory was virtually impossible, and that their chances of survival until rescue forces could reach them were minimal at best. That's when Amanda made the decision that would transform a rescue mission into something unprecedented in military history. As Amanda assessed their desperate situation, she realized that conventional survival tactics would likely result in the death of her crew within days. Major Santos' injuries required medical attention that wouldn't be available until rescue forces could reach them. Technical Sergeant Wilson needed treatment for his head injury, and their position was too exposed to defend against enemy forces that would inevitably discover the crash site. But Amanda also possessed knowledge that could change their circumstances dramatically. During her pre-deployment briefing, she had been shown intelligence reports indicating that Taliban and al-Qaeda forces in the region were operating several detention facilities where they held American prisoners of war and captured civilians. These facilities were located in caves and fortified positions throughout the mountainous area, and intelligence suggested that over 100 Americans were being held in conditions that violated every international law regarding treatment of prisoners. Amanda realized that instead of simply trying to survive until rescue forces could reach them, she could potentially conduct offensive operations that would not only improve their tactical situation, but could also accomplish rescue missions that conventional military operations had been unable to complete. Gonzalez, Amanda said, gathered her crew around a tactical map she had salvaged from her aircraft. Intel briefings mentioned enemy detention facilities in this area. If we can locate those facilities and free American prisoners, we accomplished a mission and potentially gain the manpower we need to improve our survival chances. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez studied the map, recognizing the audacious nature of what Amanda was proposing. Captain, we're talking about conducting rescue operations with 3 mobile personnel, limited ammunition, and no backup support. That's beyond high risk. It's nearly impossible. Amanda understood Gonzalez's concerns, but she also understood that their current situation offered no good option for survival. Maria, impossible is what we're facing anyway. Santos won't survive 3 days without medical attention. Wilson needs treatment we can't provide, and rescue forces can't reach us through enemy-controlled territory. Our only chance is to change the tactical situation by conducting operations that enemy forces won't expect. Major Santos, despite his injuries, recognized the strategic logic of Amanda's proposal. Torres, if intelligence reports are accurate, there could be Americans who have been held captive for months or years. Freeing them would not only save lives, but would provide us with personnel who know the terrain and enemy positions. Amanda spent the next several hours conducting reconnaissance of the immediate area, using her pilot's understanding of terrain analysis and military tactics to identify likely locations for enemy positions and detention facilities. Her observations confirmed that Taliban forces were operating multiple installations within a few miles of their crash site, but she also identified defensive weaknesses that could be exploited by a small, mobile force operated with surprise and superior training. The first facility Amanda identified was located in a cave complex approximately 2 miles from their crash site. Intelligence reports had suggested that this facility held civilian contractors and aid workers who had been captured during Taliban attacks on non-military targets. The facility was guarded by an estimated 12 enemy fighters, but Amanda's reconnaissance revealed that their defensive positions were designed to prevent large-scale rescue attempts rather than infiltration by small teams. Gonzalez, we're going to conduct a reconnaissance in force against the cave facility tonight, Amanda announced. If we can free the prisoners held there, we gain valuable intelligence about other detention sites and add trained personnel to our capabilities. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez had served 3 combat deployments and understood both the risks and potential benefits of Amanda's plan. Captain, what about Santos and Wilson? We can't leave them undefended, but we can't carry them on offensive operations. Amanda had already considered this problem. We establish a base camp in defensible terrain, camouflage their position, and conduct hit-and-run operations that keep enemy forces confused about our strength and location. The key is moving fast enough that enemy forces can't organize effective countermeasures. The base camp Amanda selected was located in a rocky overhang that provided concealment from aerial observation, while offering multiple escape routes if enemy forces discovered their position. Major Santos and Technical Sergeant Wilson were positioned with medical supplies, ammunition, and communications equipment that would allow them to call for support if their position was threatened. Santos, monitor the tactical radio and maintain communication with headquarters. Amanda instructed, if we don't return within 12 hours, provide our last known position to rescue forces and concentrate on survival until they can reach you. Amanda and Gonzalez departed their base camp at 2,200 hours, carrying ammunition, medical supplies, and basic survival equipment that would support operations for up to 3 days. Their approach to the cave facility required moving through terrain that offered excellent concealment, but was physically demanding and dangerous to navigate in darkness. Amanda's reconnaissance had identified a guard rotation schedule that would provide a brief window of opportunity when only 2 enemy fighters were positioned at the cave entrance, with the others sleeping in positions that would delay their response to any attack. The plan required precise timing and perfect execution, with no margin for error. Gonzalez, we go in fast and quiet, Amanda whispered as they positioned themselves within striking distance of the cave entrance. Neutralize the guards, secure the prisoners, and extract before enemy reinforcements can respond. The assault on the cave facility took less than 10 minutes from initiation to completion. Amanda and Gonzalez approached the guard positions using techniques they had learned during combat survival training, eliminating the sentries before they could raise an alarm. The cave interior contained 17 American prisoners, 12 civilian contractors, 3 military personnel who had been captured during previous operations, and 2 journalists who had been held for over 8 months. I'm Captain Torres, United States Air Force, Amanda announced to the prisoners as she and Gonzalez secured the facility. We're conducting extraction operations. Can you move on foot for extended distances? The prisoners' responses indicated that while they were weak from months of captivity and poor nutrition, most were capable of traveling, if provided with basic medical attention and food. More importantly, several of the military prisoners possessed knowledge of other detention facilities and enemy positions that would be crucial for additional rescue operations. Sergeant First Class Michael Rodriguez, who had been captured 6 months earlier during a reconnaissance mission, provided Amanda with intelligence that fundamentally changed her understanding of the tactical situation. Captain, there are at least 6 more facilities within 10 miles of here. Intel estimates suggest over 80 Americans are being held in this area, plus maybe 24 nationals who were captured during humanitarian operations. Amanda realized that she had stumbled onto an opportunity to conduct the largest prisoner rescue operation in recent military history. But success would require planning and execution that exceeded anything attempted by conventional forces. Rodriguez, what do you know about enemy strength and defensive positions? Amanda asked while her team prepared the freed prisoners for movement. Rodriguez had spent 6 months observing enemy operations and had developed detailed knowledge of Taliban tactical capabilities and limitations. Captain, they've got maybe 60 fighters total in this area, but they're spread across multiple positions. They're not expecting rescue operations, so their security is focused on preventing escapes rather than repelling attacks. Amanda spent the next hour gathering intelligence from the freed prisoners and developing a comprehensive plan for additional rescue operations. The information she collected revealed that Taliban forces were holding Americans in facilities that range from heavily fortified positions to simple holding areas that could be overwhelmed by small teams using surprise and superior training. Gonzalez, we're not just conducting rescue operations, Amanda announced as her expanded team prepared to move to their next objective. We're going to systematically eliminate every enemy detention facility in this area and free every American being held captive. The logistics of moving 17 freed prisoners through hostile territory while conducting additional combat operations presented challenges that would have deterred most military commanders. But Amanda had advantages that conventional rescue forces lacked. Complete surprise, detailed intelligence from freed prisoners who knew enemy positions, and the flexibility to conduct operations that enemy forces couldn't predict or counter effectively. The second rescue operation targeted a facility that held 9 American military personnel, including 2 pilots who had been shot down during previous missions. This facility was more heavily guarded than the cave complex, but Amanda's expanded force now included trained military personnel who could participate in combat operations despite their weakened condition from months of captivity. Torres, let me take point. On this assault, Sergeant Rodriguez volunteered. I know the layout of this facility and the guard positions. Plus, I got 6 months of motivation built up for payback. Amanda understood Rodriguez's desire for revenge against his captors, but she also needed to maintain discipline and tactical effectiveness among her expanded force. Rodriguez, I appreciate your motivation, but we conduct these operations professionally. No unnecessary risks, no revenge actions that compromise mission success. The assault on the second facility demonstrated how quickly Amanda's force was developing into an effective combat unit. The freed prisoners who possessed military training had recovered enough strength to participate in operations, while civilian contractors provided support functions that freed trained fighters for combat roles. The operation freed 9 additional Americans and provided intelligence about 3 more detention facilities. By dawn of their second day behind enemy lines, Amanda commanded a force of 31 free Americans and had eliminated 2 enemy positions while capturing weapons, ammunition, and supplies that significantly improved their operational capabilities. More importantly, her operations had begun to create confusion among Taliban forces who couldn't understand how their positions were being attacked by forces that appeared and disappeared without leaving any trace. Captain Torres, said Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a civilian contractor who had been held for 4 months, what you're accomplishing here is unprecedented. But how you plan to get all of us back to friendly lines? Amanda had been considering the same question, understanding that moving 31 people through hostile territory would require different tactics than those she had been using for small team operations. Dr. Walsh, we're not going back to friendly lines until we've completed our mission, Amanda replied. There are still over 60 Americans being held in enemy facilities. We're going to free every one of them, and then we're going to walk out of here together. Amanda's plan was audacious beyond anything attempted in conventional military operations, but it was also the only strategy that offered realistic hope for rescuing the Americans who had been written off as impossible to recover through normal means. Amanda's force had grown to 31 freed Americans by the end of their second day, but managing such a large group while conducting combat operations required organizational skills that went far beyond standard military tactics. She established a command structure that utilized the military experience of freed prisoners while incorporating the specialized knowledge of civilian contractors who understood local terrain and enemy behavior patterns. Sergeant First Class Rodriguez became her deputy commander, responsible for tactical planning and coordination of combat operations. Staff Sergeant Patricia Morrison, a military intelligence specialist who had been captured 8 months earlier, took charge of gathering and analyzing information about enemy positions and detention facilities. Dr. Walsh, despite being a civilian, had medical training that made her invaluable for treating the injuries and medical conditions that resulted from months of captivity under harsh conditions. Torres, we need to establish a more permanent base of operations, Rodriguez advised during their planning session for the third day's operations. Moving 31 people through hostile territory while conducting raids is putting everyone at risk. We need a secure position where we can treat injured personnel and plan complex operations. Amanda had been considering the same issue, recognizing that her expanding force required logistical support that couldn't be provided while constantly moving through enemy territory. Her reconnaissance had identified an abandoned military outpost that had been constructed by Soviet forces during their occupation of Afghanistan and later used by Northern Alliance fighters during the civil war that followed. The outpost was located in defensible terrain with good observation of surrounding approaches, access to water, and fortifications that could be improved to provide security for a force of significant size. Most importantly, the location had been abandoned for several years and was not currently occupied by Taliban forces. Rodriguez, we're going to establish our base at the old Soviet outpost, Amanda announced. It provides defensive advantages and enough space to house our personnel, while we plan operations against the remaining detention facilities. Moving 31 people to the outpost required careful coordination and security measures that exceeded anything Amanda had previously attempted. The group included personnel with various injuries and medical conditions that affected their mobility, requiring transportation assistance and frequent rest stops that made the movement vulnerable to enemy observation. Staff Sergeant Gonzalez organized the movement using military formation techniques adapted for mixed groups of military and civilian personnel. Captain, we move in 3 groups with staggered timing. Military personnel provide security, while civilians move through covered routes. If we encounter enemy forces, the military personnel engage while civilians move to predetermined rally points. The movement to the Soviet outpost took 18 hours and required crossing terrain that was constantly under observation by Taliban forces. Amanda's group encountered 2 enemy patrols during the movement, but superior training and the advantage of surprise allowed them to eliminate the threats without casualties or compromise their operational security. The abandoned outpost proved to be better than Amanda had hoped, with fortifications that remained structurally sound and defensive positions that could be improved using materials available in the area. More importantly, the facility included underground areas that could provide shelter during artillery attacks and storage space for supplies that would be captured during future operations. Dr. Walsh established a medical facility in the underground area. Amanda directed as her force began organizing their base of operations. Rodriguez coordinated perimeter security and planned defensive positions that can repel attacks by larger enemy forces. The establishment of a permanent base allowed Amanda to plan more complex operations against enemy detention facilities that held larger numbers of prisoners and were more heavily defended. Intelligence gathered from freed prisoners indicated that the remaining facilities contained over 70 Americans, but rescuing them would require coordinated attacks that exceeded the capabilities of small infiltration teams. Sergeant Morrison's intelligence analysis revealed that Taliban forces were beginning to recognize that they were facing organized resistance rather than random attacks by isolated survivors. Captain, enemy communications indicate they're consolidating their forces and improving security at detention facilities. They're also organizing search operations to locate our base. Amanda understood that her operations had reached a critical point where enemy forces would either be defeated decisively or would organize effective countermeasures that could result in the recapture or death of all the Americans she had freed. Morrison, how long do we have before enemy forces locate our position? Amanda asked while reviewing intelligence reports and operational plans. Morrison's analysis was sobering. Captain, Based on their search patterns and the resources they're committing, I estimate we have perhaps 48 hours before they locate this base. After that, we'll be facing coordinated attacks by forces that significantly outnumber us. Amanda gathered her senior personnel for a planning session that would determine whether her rescue operations would end in success or disaster. The tactical situation required decisive action that would either free the remaining American prisoners or result in the capture or death of everyone she had already rescued. People, we have two options. Amanda announced to her leadership team. We can attempt to escape to friendly territory with the Americans we've already freed, or we can conduct simultaneous attacks against all remaining detention facilities before enemy forces can locate our base. The discussion that followed revealed the extraordinary commitment of the Americans Amanda had freed. Despite months of captivity, harsh treatment, and the physical weakness that resulted from poor nutrition and medical neglect, every military member voted to continue rescue operations until all Americans were freed. Captain Torres, said Captain James Mitchell, a pilot who had been held for over a year, you've given us our lives back. We're not leaving Americans behind when we have the capability to rescue them. Amanda felt a mixture of pride and apprehension as she realized that her force was committed to conducting what would be the most complex prisoner rescue operation in military history, using personnel who were still recovering from months of captivity and operating with limited supplies in enemy territory. All right, people. We conduct simultaneous raids against 4 facilities tomorrow night, Amanda announced. Rodriguez coordinates the assault teams, Morrison provides intelligence support, and Walsh establishes casualty collection points for treating wounded personnel. The operational plan Amanda developed required dividing her force into 4 assault teams, each responsible for attacking a different detention facility while maintaining communication and coordination that would allow mutual support if any team encountered unexpected resistance. The plan was complex and dangerous, but offered the best chance for freeing all remaining American prisoners before enemy forces could organize effective countermeasures. The assault teams departed their base at 2,000 hours, moving through terrain that Amanda's reconnaissance had identified as offering the best approach routes to their respective targets. Each team included military personnel with combat experience and civilian contractors who possessed specialized knowledge that would be valuable for breaching security and managing free prisoners. Amanda led the assault on the largest detention facility, which intelligence indicated held over 20 Americans, including several high-value prisoners, who possessed classified information that enemy forces had been attempting to extract through interrogation and torture. Torres, this is Rodriguez, came the radio transmission as the assault teams approached their targets. Team 2 is in position and ready to assault on your command. Amanda received similar confirmations from the other assault teams as they prepared to conduct coordinated attacks that would eliminate all remaining enemy detention facilities in the area. All teams, this is Torres, execute assault in 30 seconds. Remember, speed and violence of action. Get in, secure the prisoners, and get out before enemy forces can respond. The coordinated assaults began at exactly 2,130 hours, with all 4 teams attacking their targets simultaneously to prevent enemy forces from organizing mutual support or calling for reinforcements. Amanda's assault on the primary facility encountered the heaviest resistance, with 12 enemy guards who fought desperately to prevent the rescue of their high-value prisoners. The firefight lasted less than 15 minutes, but it demonstrated the effectiveness of Amanda's tactical planning and the recovered combat effectiveness of the Americans she had freed. Her assault team eliminated all enemy resistance while suffering only minor casualties, and they successfully freed 23 Americans, including 2 CIA operatives who had been captured during covert operations. Torres, this is Rodriguez. Team 2 has secured 15 prisoners and is moving to Extraction Point Alpha. Similar reports came from the other assault teams as Amanda's coordinated operation achieved complete success, freeing all remaining American prisoners while eliminating enemy detention capabilities in the entire region. By dawn of their 4th day behind enemy lines, Amanda commanded a force of 97 freed Americans plus her original crew members, representing the largest prisoner rescue operation in modern military history. But success created new challenges, as moving nearly 100 people through hostile territory to friendly lines required logistical capabilities and tactical planning that exceeded anything she had previously attempted. Captain Torres, said Colonel David Harrison, the senior officer among the freed prisoners, what you accomplish here is unprecedented in military history. But how do we get everyone home? Amanda had been considering the same question, understanding that conventional extraction methods wouldn't work for a group of this size operating deep in enemy territory. Colonel Harrison, we're going to fight our way out, Amanda replied. We've eliminated enemy detention capabilities and captured enough weapons and supplies to conduct sustained operations. We move as a military formation, establish defensive positions when necessary, and fight through any opposition we encounter. Amanda's plan for extracting 97 freed Americans required transforming her rescue force into a combat unit capable of conducting sustained operations against organized enemy resistance. The plan was audacious and dangerous, but offered the only realistic hope for returning to friendly lines with all personnel intact. The march toward American-controlled territory began at 0600 hours, with Amanda's force organized into a military formation that could provide mutual support while maintaining the flexibility necessary for movement through difficult terrain. The formation included reconnaissance elements, assault teams, casualty evacuation capabilities, and supply management that would support operations for up to 10 days. Rodriguez maintained security elements at 500-meter intervals. Amanda ordered as her force began the dangerous journey toward friendly lines. Morrison monitor enemy communications and provide early warning of any organized resistance. The first contact with enemy forces occurred 6 hours into their movement, when Amanda's lead reconnaissance element encountered a Taliban patrol that was searching for the Americans responsible for attacking detention facilities. The engagement was brief but intense, with Amanda's superior training and tactics allowing her force to eliminate the enemy patrol without casualties. But the contact also indicated that Taliban forces were actively searching for a group and would organize significant resistance once their position and strength were determined. Torres, we're picking up increased radio traffic indicating enemy forces are mobilizing throughout the region, Morrison reported. They're organizing blocking positions along the most likely routes to American-controlled territory. Amanda realized that her force would have to fight through multiple enemy positions during their extraction, requiring sustained combat operations while protecting nearly 100 personnel who were still recovering from months of captivity. All personnel, we're going to encounter significant enemy resistance during our movement to friendly lines, Amanda announced. Stay alert, follow orders immediately, and remember that we've come too far to fail now. The battle for extraction would test every aspect of Amanda's leadership and tactical planning, as her unprecedented rescue operation entered its most dangerous phase. But the Americans she had freed understood that their survival depended on fighting their way home together, and they were determined to prove that no obstacle was insurmountable when faced by people who refused to leave anyone behind. The first major engagement occurred at a mountain pass that represented the only viable route through the rain that would otherwise require a detour of several days through areas with even heavier enemy presence. Taliban forces had established a blocking position that included approximately 40 fighters with heavy weapons positioned to prevent any American force from passing through the narrow valley. Amanda studied the enemy position through binoculars, recognizing that a frontal assault would result in significant casualties among her force, many of whom were still recovering from months of captivity and harsh treatment. But she also understood that bypassing the position would expose her group to pursuit by enemy forces who would eventually corner them in terrain that offered even fewer tactical advantages. Rodriguez, what's your assessment of the enemy position? Amanda asked while developing her attack plan. Rodriguez had been studying the Taliban defensive positions and identifying weaknesses that could be exploited by superior tactics and training. Captain, they position themselves to stop a conventional attack, but they're vulnerable to infiltration from the high ground. If we can get assault teams above their positions, we can attack from directions they're not expecting. Amanda's plan required dividing her force while conducting complex maneuvers in mountainous terrain that would challenge even experienced military units. The plan called for the majority of her people to remain in concealed positions while small assault teams infiltrated enemy positions and attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. Colonel Harrison, you'll command the main group while I lead the assault teams, Amanda instructed. If we fail to eliminate the enemy position, move south through the alternate route, and attempt to reach friendly lines independently. Harrison understood the risks Amanda was accepting on behalf of the group. Torres, you've already done more than anyone could expect. Don't risk everything on one engagement. Amanda appreciated Harrison's concern, but she also understood that her force's survival depended on eliminating enemy resistance quickly and decisively. Colonel, we don't have a luxury of conservative tactics. If we can't fight through enemy positions, we're going to lose people to starvation, exposure, and pursuit by forces that will eventually overwhelm us. The assault on the Taliban blocking position began at 0400 hours, with Amanda leading 3 teams that approached the enemy from directions they hadn't anticipated. The attack utilized night vision equipment that had been captured during previous operations, giving Amanda's teams a significant advantage over enemy forces who were relying on conventional observation methods. Amanda's assault teams achieved complete surprise, eliminating enemy positions through coordinated attacks that prevented Taliban forces from organizing effective resistance. The engagement lasted less than 30 minutes and resulted in the destruction of the blocking position while inflicting minimal casualties on Amanda's force. Torres, this is Harrison. Outstanding work. The pass is clear and we're ready to move through. Amanda's force continued their movement toward friendly lines, but the engagement had demonstrated that Taliban forces were organizing significant resistance to prevent the Americans from escaping. Intelligence gathered from captured enemy communications indicated that over 200 Taliban fighters were being positioned along routes that led to American-controlled territory. Morrison, enemy communications are indicating they're planning a major operation to prevent our extraction, Amanda reported during a planning session that evening. They're positioning forces to attack us during movement through the next valley system. Amanda realized that her force was approaching the decisive engagement that would determine whether their rescue operations would end in success or disaster. The tactical situation required her to accept a major battle against superior numbers while protecting nearly 100 personnel who couldn't all participate effectively in sustained combat operations. People, tomorrow we face the largest enemy force we've encountered, Amanda announced to her assembled group. They outnumber us significantly, but we have superior training, better equipment, and motivation they can't match. We're going home together, and we're taking everyone with us. The battle that would determine the fate of Amanda's rescue operation began at dawn when Taliban forces attacked her defensive positions with over 150 fighters supported by mortars and heavy machine guns. The enemy plan was to fix Amanda's force in place while surrounding them with superior numbers that would overwhelm their defensive positions. But Amanda had anticipated the enemy's strategy and had prepared defensive positions that utilized terrain advantages while providing field of fire that maximized the effectiveness of her limited heavy weapons. More importantly, she had organized her force to conduct defensive operations that utilized the capabilities of every person in her group, including civilians who couldn't participate in direct combat, but could provide support functions that freed trained fighters for frontline positions. Rodriguez, initiate counterattack on the eastern approach, Amanda ordered as enemy forces attempted to infiltrate her defensive positions. Morrison, coordinate fire support on the mortar positions. The battle lasted over 6 hours and represented the largest engagement between American and Taliban forces in the region during that year. Amanda's superior tactics and the determination of her personnel resulted in the defeat of enemy forces despite being significantly outnumbered. But the victory came at a cost, with several Americans wounded during the engagement and ammunition supplies depleted to levels that would make additional major engagements impossible. Torres, we've won this battle, but we can't sustain these casualty rates, Dr. Walsh reported while treating wounded personnel. If we encounter another major enemy force, we're going to lose people we've worked so hard to save. Amanda understood Walsh's concerns, but she also knew that they were approaching American-controlled territory, and that rescue was possible if they could maintain their movement for another 2 days. Dr. Walsh, intelligence indicates we're within 12 miles of friendly lines. If we can avoid major engagements and maintain our current pace, we should reach American positions within 48 hours. The final phase of Amanda's extraction required moving her force through terrain that offered limited concealment while avoiding enemy patrols that were actively searching for surviving Americans. The movement required careful timing and coordination that utilized every lesson Amanda had learned during 17 days of operations behind enemy lines. Rodriguez established reconnaissance elements at 1,000-meter intervals. Amanda ordered as her force prepare for the final movement toward American positions. We need early warning of any enemy forces that might intercept us before we reach friendly lines. The terrain they would traverse consisted of open valleys and exposed ridgelines that provided excellent fields of observation for enemy forces, but offered limited concealment for a group approaching 100 people. Amanda's movement plan required precise timing that would minimize exposure during daylight hours while maintaining sufficient speed to reach American positions before enemy forces could organize another major attack. Staff Sergeant Morrison's intelligence analysis indicated that Taliban forces were positioning their remaining fighters along the most direct routes to American-controlled territory, hoping to intercept Amanda's group during their final approach to safety. Captain, enemy communications suggest they're planning one final attempt to prevent our extraction, Morrison reported. They're concentrating their remaining forces at the entrance to the valley that leads to Forward Operating Base Mitchell. Amanda studied the terrain between their current position and FOB Mitchell, recognizing that the enemy had chosen their blocking position well. The valley represented the only viable approach route for a large group, and Taliban forces would have significant tactical advantages if they forced engagement in that terrain. Morrison, what do we know about enemy strength at the blocking position? Amanda asked while developing alternative plans that might avoid a direct confrontation. Morrison's analysis was based on intercepted communications and reconnaissance reports from freed prisoners who had knowledge of Taliban tactical capabilities. Captain, intelligence suggests they have approximately 60 fighters with heavy weapons positioned to control the valley entrance. They're expecting us to attempt passage during daylight hours when they'll have optimal observation and fields of fire. Amanda realized that conventional tactical approaches would result in casualties that her force couldn't sustain, especially among the freed prisoners who were still recovering from months of captivity. But she also understood that bypassing the enemy position would require a detour through terrain that would expose her group to pursuit by additional Taliban forces. Rodriguez, we're going to conduct a night infiltration to the enemy blocking position, Amanda announced. Small teams will eliminate their observation posts while the main group moves through undercover darkness. Rodriguez studied Amanda's plan, recognizing both the tactical sophistication required and the risks involved in conducting complex operations with personnel who included many civilians. Captain, night infiltration with this many people is extremely challenging. If we're detected during the approach, we'll be caught in the open with limited defensive options. Amanda understood Rodriguez's concerns, but she also knew that avoiding the enemy blocking position would require exposing her group to pursuit operations that could continue for days through terrain that offered no sanctuary. Rodriguez, the alternative is allowing enemy forces to dictate the terms of engagement on ground of their choosing. Night infiltration gives us the best chance of reaching friendly lines with all personnel intact. The infiltration operation began at 2,200 hours, with Amanda's assault teams moving ahead of the main group to eliminate enemy observation posts that could detect the approach of nearly 100 Americans through the valley. The operation required perfect coordination between multiple teams operating in darkness across terrain that offered numerous opportunities for confusion and mistakes that could compromise the entire mission. Amanda led the primary assault team responsible for eliminating the main enemy position, while Rodriguez coordinated the movement of freed prisoners through routes that had been cleared by advanced teams. The plan required precise timing that would allow the main group to pass through the valley before enemy forces could respond to the elimination of their security positions. Torres, this is Team 3. Northern observation post is eliminated. Route is clear for main group passage. Amanda received similar reports from other assault teams as her infiltration operation achieved its initial objectives. But she also understood that the most dangerous phase would come when her large group attempted to move through terrain that was still partially controlled by enemy forces. Harrison, begin movement of the main group through Route Alpha. Amanda transmitted to the colonel, who was coordinating the movement of freed prisoners. Maintain noise discipline and be prepared to take cover if we encounter unexpected enemy positions. The movement of 97 freed Americans plus Amanda's crew through enemy-controlled territory represented one of the most complex extraction operations ever attempted by American forces. The group included personnel with various injuries and medical conditions that affected their mobility, requiring assistance and frequent rest stops that increased their vulnerability to detection. Dr. Walsh coordinated medical support during the movement, ensuring that injured personnel received assistance while maintaining the pace necessary to clear the danger area before enemy forces could organize effective countermeasures. Captain Torres. Sergeant Collins is having difficulty with his leg wound, and two of the civilian contractors are showing signs of exhaustion, Walsh reported during the movement through the valley. Amanda had anticipated that some personnel would experience difficulty during the demanding movement, and she had prepared contingency plans that would ensure no one was left behind regardless of their physical condition. Walsh organized stretcher teams using the strongest personnel available. We maintain our pace, and we take everyone with us. The breakthrough moment came at 0347 hours when Amanda's lead reconnaissance element established visual contact with American positions at Forward Operating Base Mitchell. The base's perimeter guards have been alerted to expect a large group of American personnel approaching from the north, but the actual sight of nearly 100 people emerging from enemy territory created initial confusion among defenders who had not been briefed on the full scope of Amanda's rescue operations. This is Captain Torres, United States Air Force, approaching your perimeter with 97 freed American prisoners and my crew. Amanda transmitted on emergency frequencies as her group approached the base's defensive positions. The response from FOB Mitchell indicated the extraordinary nature of what Amanda had accomplished during her 17 days behind enemy lines. Captain Torres, this is Colonel Peterson, base commander. Did you say 97 freed prisoners? We were expecting a rescue operation for your down crew. Amanda understood Peterson's confusion, as her rescue operations had far exceeded anything that military planners had considered possible when her aircraft was shot down over 2 weeks earlier. Colonel Peterson, that's affirmative. 97 American prisoners of war and civilians, plus my surviving crew members. We conducted systematic rescue operations against enemy detention facilities throughout the region. The arrival of Amanda's group at FOB Mitchell created immediate logistical challenges for base personnel who had not prepared to receive and process nearly 100 freed prisoners, requiring medical attention, debriefing, and transportation to medical facilities for treatment of conditions resulting from extended captivity. But more significantly, Amanda's success had demonstrated that large-scale prisoner rescue operations were possible even in heavily contested territory, using tactics and leadership that exceeded conventional military doctrine. Colonel Peterson coordinated the initial processing of freed prisoners while requesting additional medical and transportation assets from military headquarters. Captain Torres, what you've accomplished here is unprecedented. Can you provide me with a preliminary report on your operations? Amanda's initial briefing revealed the scope of her rescue operations and the intelligence she had gathered about enemy detention capabilities throughout the region. Her systematic elimination of Taliban prison facilities had not only freed American prisoners, but had also gathered information that would be valuable for future operations against remaining enemy positions. Colonel, we eliminated 6 major detention facilities and captured extensive intelligence about enemy operations throughout this region. The information gathered during our operations should be valuable for planning future missions against remaining Taliban positions. Amanda's crew members, who had survived the aircraft crash and supported 17 days of combat operations behind enemy lines, were processed separately for medical evaluation and mission debriefing. Major Santos' leg injury had healed sufficiently during their operations to allow him to participate in the final movement to friendly lines, while Technical Sergeant Wilson had recovered from his head injury and had contributed significantly to the rescue operations. Torres, I still can't believe what we accomplished out there, Santos said during their medical evaluation. When we crashed, I thought we had maybe a 10% chance of survival. I never imagined we'd end up rescuing 97 Americans. Amanda reflected on the 17 days that had transformed a routine supply mission into the largest prisoner rescue operation in recent military history. Her decision to conduct offensive operations rather than simply trying to survive had not only saved her crew, but had freed Americans who had been written off as impossible to rescue through conventional means. "Rick, we accomplished something that military planners said couldn't be done," Amanda replied. "But more importantly, we brought home Americans who deserve to be rescued regardless of the risks involved." The intelligence debriefing that followed Amanda's return revealed information that fundamentally changed military understanding of enemy detention capabilities and provided targeting data that would be used in future operations throughout the region. Her systematic gathering of intelligence during rescue operations had created a comprehensive picture of Taliban operations that exceeded what conventional intelligence gathering had achieved over months of standard operations. Major General Patricia Hayes, who conducted Amanda's formal debriefing, recognized that Amanda's operations had implications that extended far beyond the immediate rescue of American prisoners. "Captain Torres, your operations demonstrate that unconventional tactics can achieve results that exceed what's possible through standard military procedures. Your success will influence how we approach prisoner rescue operations throughout the theater." Amanda understood that her operations had established precedents that would be studied and potentially replicated in future scenarios where American personnel were held in enemy territory. General Hayes, the key factors were superior training, willingness to accept risk, and understanding that rescued prisoners become force multipliers if they're properly organized and equipped. The success wasn't based on exceptional individual capabilities, but on systematic application of sound tactical principles. Amanda's Medal of Honor citation, approved 6 months after her rescue operations, recognized achievements that exceeded the established criteria for military's highest decoration. Her 17 days behind enemy lines had resulted in the rescue of 97 Americans, the elimination of enemy detention capabilities throughout a strategic region, and the gathering of intelligence that influenced subsequent military operations. But perhaps more significantly, Amanda's operations had demonstrated that individual initiative and tactical innovation could achieve results that exceeded what was possible through conventional military planning and doctrine. 2 years after her rescue operations, Colonel Amanda Torres was assigned to command the military's new Prisoner Recovery Operations Center, where she developed training programs and tactical doctrine based on the techniques she had proven during her time behind enemy lines. Her approach to prisoner rescue operations emphasized that successful missions required willingness to conduct offensive operations rather than simply waiting for conventional rescue forces, and that freed prisoners could become valuable assets if properly organized and led. The key lesson from our operations in Afghanistan, Amanda explained to officers attending her advanced rescue operations course, is that impossible missions become possible when you refuse to accept conventional limitations and when you understand that every rescued prisoner represents not just a life saved, but a trained asset who can contribute to additional rescue operations. Amanda's training programs influenced military rescue doctrine throughout the armed forces, establishing new standards for operations in enemy territory that emphasized offensive action, tactical innovation, and the systematic utilization of freed prisoners as force multipliers in extended operations. But for Amanda personally, the most important outcome of her 17 days behind enemy lines was simpler. 97 Americans who had been written off as impossible to rescue were able to return home to their families, proving that no situation is hopeless when faced by people who refuse to leave anyone behind. The pilot who was supposed to conduct a routine supply mission had instead conducted the largest prisoner rescue operation in military history, demonstrating that heroes are defined not by the circumstances they encounter, but by their response to those circumstances when lives depend on their decisions. Amanda's story became legendary among military aviators and rescue specialists, but she always emphasized that her success had been achieved through systematic application of military training rather than exceptional individual capabilities. Anyone with proper training and sufficient motivation could have accomplished what we did. Amanda would tell audiences who wanted to understand how one person could rescue 97 prisoners from enemy territory. The difference between success and failure was refusing to accept that rescue was impossible and understanding that freed prisoners become your most valuable assets if you organize them properly. Amanda Torres had proven that impossible missions are often just missions that require unconventional approaches, and that individual initiative can achieve results that exceed what's possible through conventional military operations when lives depend on refusing to accept defeat. Her 17 days behind enemy lines had transformed a routine supply mission into a rescue operation that saved 97 American lives and established new standards for what's possible when military personnel refuse to leave anyone behind, regardless of the risks or obstacles involved. Have you ever refused to accept that something was impossible, even when everyone else had given up hope? Amanda Torres' story reminds us that the greatest rescues are often accomplished by those who understand that impossible is just another word for missions that require unconventional solutions and unwavering determination. Subscribe to Those Who Left a Trace if you believe that heroes are defined not by how they fall, but by how many they lift up while rising to meet impossible challenges. We'll see you in the next story, where we'll continue to honor those who prove that no one gets left behind when faced by people who refuse to accept defeat, regardless of the odds or obstacles they encounter.